Hello, hello. Alright, before I get into my Exodus video, I want to make a quick one. I just find this kind of a funny story. So the other day, my girlfriend wanted to watch this show on Netflix called The Family, and she asked, how much of this is going to be BS? And I'll give you a quick summary. The Family is basically a documentary series about this underground Christian organization within the political powers of not only Washington, D.C., but it's spread throughout many countries. And like the group that puts on the prayer breakfast that the president goes to every year, this is that group. And she wanted to, and it's become corrupt in a lot of ways, and they use their influence in politics to go their way. And because they're a Christian organization, it's church and state and all this stuff. And she wanted to know how much of it was going to be BS. I was like, well, it's on Netflix, so it's BS. It wouldn't be on there if it was all truth. And it was exactly what I thought it would be. It's bits of truths put in there with big omissions of other stuff. And you could tell it wasn't terrible. I mean, they did it wisely, but I knew from the get-go, and maybe I had a bias going in, but I thought it became clear that they were trying to paint Christians in this hypocritical, corrupt, and dumb kind of light in a lot of ways. And they did tell, I'm only on episode like 4, and they're doing a pretty legitimate job of not being too outright about it, but I just kind of figured that was what was going on, and maybe I had a bias, but it seemed like that's what's happening. Because basically what seems to have happened, I've done a lot of research on this organization, C Street and all that stuff since watching it. It seems to have started pretty legitimately, as this Norwegian immigrant who, back in the days before socialism in the Norwegian countries when they were still very Christian, they had prayer groups within their parliaments and stuff, and people from different party lines would come together, and it was a uniting thing, seeing that we're all working towards good under God's eyes. And although we have different point of views on how to get there, we're all on the same team. It's kind of like when you'll see Calvinists and Armenians talking together about the Christian faith and how they might debate different doctrines or different dogmas, but they are like, it's great that we can come together under the fellowship of Christ in either way. So, and it really helped to tie the bonds between these opposing political views. So this immigrant starts this organization in America, and it starts to gain influence. And then eventually, like everything, over time, it just grows to be kind of overly powerful and corrupt, and it's not really working for Christian views. A lot of the people within it, I'm sure, still think it is and still think it's wonderful. In a lot of ways it might be, but the powers that be use it to, because their whole philosophy, it seems, is not what Christ said, to go preach to the masses, to the poor, and the sinners, but instead they see it as, well, let's go preach to the wolves. Forget the lambs. Let's preach to the wolves, because if we can get a wolf on our side, it'll be so much easier to get the lambs. I see I get it, strategy-wise, but that's not what Christ said to do, so don't change his strategy. But that's kind of what they end up doing. And so they want to get politicians in power, and they start seeing people as assets, and so they cover up sex scandals and stuff like that so that their guys continue to gain power and gain influence, and it's a corrupt organization. And just know, if you watch the documentary, it's pretty well done, but it's just bits of truth. They're not giving you the whole truth. And it's funny, I see some articles out there, like this one, it's The Family puts a secret organization in the spotlight, but could use stronger wattage. And a bunch of them are just saying, it's interesting, but they don't give a whole lot of information. Yeah, that's how they got on Netflix. Of course, they're not going to give you all the information, because then you'll see how corrupt everything is and everyone is. They just wanted to make this Christian group of corrupt people at the top of it look bad. But I have to say, episode 3, I found to be very funny. Of course, my girlfriend fell asleep because, it's a documentary and everything. But in episode 3, they start talking about Russia. And so the Soviet Union was atheistic, and basically what happens is this organization starts prayer groups in all these other countries, and they start gaining influence around the world, you know, globalists. And so Russia was so atheistic under the Soviet Union. That it was a communist, atheistic country, and Christians were persecuted. So when it fell, the Christians were able to like be free to be Christian, and it was a momentous occasion for them. But you have to understand, they were an atheist. These are real Christians. Okay, these are not that Americans aren't, but these are Christians who have faced the real, you know, the stuff's hit the fan. I'm trying not to swear. They faced gulags. All right, they were imprisoned and persecuted and punished for being Christian by their own government, and they survived and made it through. And they get through, and what's going on in the early stages of Russia, just like in the Soviet Union, is corruption was just second nature. It was something to expect. Bribes were expected. You know, it was, of course, corruption is just part of the everyday life in Russia because it had been so atheistic for so long, and the morals have been eroded. And a lot of these Christian politicians who now are free reached out to this organization in America because they wanted to start this prayer group, because they literally would have fights in like their Congress, in their parliament or whatever it's called for them. They would have fist fights and stuff because a lot of them are like just mafia goons. I mean, the mafia is still running a lot of the stuff over there at this time, and it was pretty bad. But this Christian organization knew that they could, or saw this as an opportunity to bring the sides together under a Christian faith. So they want to get this prayer group in there, and I don't believe that these Russians really knew. The guy they interview, like I said, they're trying to make him look a little dumb. You could tell he didn't know anything about this Christian organization, like covering up sex scandals for American politicians or anything like that. He just saw them as a prayer group, and he came to the first one in America, and he couldn't even understand it. He didn't speak any English or anything. They reach out, they come over, and they help out the Russians. And very quickly, the episode starts getting into, we start to see this shift. And remember, like, sinister music is kind of playing in the background. And we start to see this shift around the mid to late 2000s of evangelical Christian being in the forefront of Russian politicians. And then, of course, there's pictures of... And the whole time, understand, like, they're always, like, flashing pictures of Trump without really mentioning Trump. Because that's what you do when there's sinister music. But then they'll show pictures of Putin, like, in the Russian Orthodox Church, lighting candles and all this stuff. So the next scene, after they're talking about evangelical Christians is on the rise, and the reason it's on a rise is because they're trying to use it to fight the corruption that has taken place in Russia. Because Russia has now gone from, they're trying to, their best to go from an atheistic, communist hellhole with corruption as second nature to a democratic Christian. I mean, they have a large Muslim population. They have freedom of religion, but a more moralistic, religious-centered society, and Christianity being the majority religion, that has these morals in place so corruption isn't expected in second nature anymore, you know, which usually comes from a religious background. So this is what they're moving. They're moving from corrupt, communist, atheistic to Christian, democratic, anti-corruption. The very next scene is, then we start to see sinister music, that all these right-wing Christian politicians and evangelicals in America are starting to talk about Russia, not so much as an enemy, but as a friend. Dun, 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 dun. And they like really play it up. You know, they show Franklin Graham and all these people in the late 2000s talking about how Russia is becoming a great place and all, it's on the rise and this stuff, and we should become friends with them because they're trying to become a better place and all this stuff. And the episode is really like painting it that it was a scheme, you know, like they're scheming. And I'm sure people were scheming. Duh. Everyone, there's always going to be people who are scheming. But the fact that this country is moving from a atheistic, communist, corrupt hellhole to a democratic, Christian, moral and ethical based society, seems like we would want to be friends with them. You know, and then it leads up into like Trump and he gets in there. I just have to say, that's so funny to me. They make it seem sinister that we now want to be friends with this country that isn't the Soviet Union anymore and is trying to fight corruption, become Christian and democratic. And because Christian, Democratic, well, they're Republicans mostly, said, yes, this is a good idea, that somehow is a scheme by the C Street Christian organization. Now, I'm sure, again, there are people, the C Street was going to use it to their advantage and not to Christ's advantage, but they may mean it for evil, but God means it for good, you know? Just like Joseph, Genesis 50:20. You may mean this for evil, but they mean it for good. How can you not see that just the average Christian would think, that the average person would think that that's actually a legitimate idea? This powerful nation that we used to be a big enemy with, it's no longer has the same identity that we hated. We hated the communist, atheistic corruption that they had. Now they're anti-corruption, at least trying to be Christian and democratic. Maybe we should look into being their friends now. But no, it's all about, ooh, scheming, they're scheming, and this is all like set up. And of course they're going to say, let's be friends with them now. Yeah, of course they are. But yeah, I don't understand how you don't see that that's a good idea. You know, still be leery, still be like, okay, you know, I mean, we should try and be friends with them, but I mean, still America first, and we don't totally trust them, just like we shouldn't totally trust any other nation, really. But the fact that they said that it was like this sinister music in the background, how now they're talking about being friends with this Russian, Christian, democratic, anti-corrupt society. Can you believe it? Ooh, those scheming Christians. That's all I had to say about it. I mean, you should check it out. It's not bad. I mean, if you don't have Netflix, don't pay for it. I don't pay for it. And I don't suggest you do either. Don't support the beast. But I'm sure you can get it online free somewhere too. It's not terrible. And just the important part is know they're not telling you all the truth. And you look into yourself if you want. But it's pretty funny. Because if you watch it as like a believing, knowledgeable Christian, you're just like, what? Because you know that not everybody who calls himself Christian is a good person. You know that a lot of these, with absolute power comes corruption. You know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you are aware of this stuff. And it's like people don't know that a lot of Christians are aware of this because people don't read the Bible. People, if you read the Bible, you understand this stuff. And most Christians, I don't know what the majority is, but I would say most Christians do read their Bible. You know, it may be a small majority, maybe like 55% of Christians read and know their Bible, but it's still a majority. And since Christianity is the majority religion, that's still a lot of people. So you have to understand, to a lot of people, they're watching this, knowing and understanding it, and just seeing it as ridiculous a lot of times. How is that not ridiculous? Don't talk about being friends with Russia, because they are now democratic and not communists. Isn't that a good thing? No, because they're Russia. It was pretty funny to watch. It's all those scheming Christians, you know, those jerks. All right, everyone, have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or good night. God bless.